So it's time to do the annual tradition, which is do a season preview of the San Jose Earthquakes. I basically have been doing this pretty much every single year, just a couple of weeks before the season begin. And I actually thought about doing a season preview for all 2017 this season, but unfortunately, it's pretty much too late for me to begin a series where I do a season preview for every single team, since we're only about 16 days before the season begin, and that I already have videos that I'm planning to do in these next couple of weeks. And if you add on top of what of me potentially do a season preview for every single team, that's just way too much for me to do, and I probably will not have enough time to basically do all of that before the season begin. But I will have time to do at least one other season preview for another team, and on Thursday I'm actually going to look at the New Boys Austin FC and look at their expansion year and how their expansion season could look like. But for today, we are of course looking at the San Jose Earthquakes and how their season could be. And there's no doubt that this upcoming season is an expectation year for the Quakes. And anytime when it's a year where there's expectation and that this team not only should be making the playoffs, but also at least win one or two playoff game this season, it does make me nervous, the fact that the team is not going to do that, because we've seen in the past, whenever the Quakes have expectation, they always tend to let their fans down. And a great example of that is 2018, where I think 2018 was the last time when the Quakes actually had some expectation, and you know what happened that year. I mean, I don't think this year is going to be as bad as what we had in 2018. In fact, I don't think any Quakes season is going to be as bad as 2018, because it's going to be very hard for a future Quakes team to match what happened in 2018, when the team only won 4 games and finished with just 21 points. But I do worry the fact that with this team, and that this team, I think it has a decent roster to maybe make the playoffs, but it's going to be interesting to see if they of course can do so throughout the season. Now, last year they finished with a record of 8-6-9, and they finished with 30 points. They scored 35 goals and gave up 51 goals, which was by far the most goals that any team has conceded, and they had the worst defensive record, and their goal differential was -16, and they finished 8th in the Western Conference, which last year it was just good enough for them to make it to the playoffs because of the expanded playoff format. But this season, it's not going to be the same case. If the Quakes are going to be finished 8th for the 3rd year in a row, they will of course miss out on the playoffs, because the playoffs format this season is going back to the 2019 playoff format. Now, the current roster for the Quakes: in goal, you got JT Marcinkowski, Daniel Vega, Emi Ochoa, and Mark Brizano. In defense, you got Lucho Abekis, Oswaldo Alniz, Florian Youngworth, Marcos Lopez, Tanner Beeson, Jacob Akinarich, Paul Marie, Tommy Thompson, and Casey Walls. In the midfield, you got Christian Espinoza, Carlos Fierro, Judson, Jackson Yo, Eric Remedi, Chofis Lopez, Shea Salinas, Eric Cavallo, Gilbert Fuentes, Seth Haji, and Jack Skyhan. And then in the forward group, you got Kay Caldwell, Andy Rios, Benji Kekanevich, and Chris Wondolowski, who is most likely, this is going to be his swan year, and that this is also another reason why this year is an expectation year for the Quakes, because they want to make sure this last ever season for Wando is going to be a memorable one, and a way to do that is for them to win MLS Cup. Because imagine if the Quakes are able to win MLS Cup this season, and that this is Wando's final year, and that he's able to ride off the sunset with an MLS Cup, which is something that, I know Wando has won MLS Cup before early in his day with Houston, but I feel like it's just kind of sad, the fact that all this year that he's been with the Quakes, and he has been carrying this team on his back, and yet there hasn't really been any time where he even came close to reaching MLS Cup with the Quakes, and that this would be a great way to pretty much close what a legendary career, and probably the best player that the Quakes have ever had in their club history, and end up and basically gone out with a championship. But in terms of the transfer that the Quakes did this off season, so unlike last off season where the Quakes basically did nothing in the transfer market, this season at least they kind of did something in the transfer market by bringing in Eric Remedi from Atlanta, Lucho Abekis from Libertad, which is a club in Paraguay. Then they got Chofis Lopez from Chivas, and Benji Kekanavich from Reno 1868. Now, a player that is no longer with this team and got sold throughout this offseason, include Nick Lima, who is going to be going to Austin. And I think this was probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, surprise departure in this offseason, because as much as I know Nick Lima had a rough year last season, I didn't think the Quakes were even thinking about trying to get rid of him. And if anything, if the Quakes were ever going to get rid of Nick Lima, they would eventually get rid of him to basically sell to a European club and pretty much cash in on that not actually sell him to another club, where despite the fact that they did get a good chunk of general allocation money, around $600,000, I just feel like even with that amount of general allocation money that the Quakes receive, which first of all they probably are not going to spend that game that they received, I feel like it was really strange the fact that they decided to sell him, and that I kind of also feel like they didn't learn the same mistake from the past, where you know in the past when the Quakes used to sell fullbacks like Just Tomorrow and Stephen Beitashour, and that some of those decision was kind of questionable, and yeah, it turns out to be to definitely come back to haunt the Quakes, because both of those guys eventually win MLS Cup. Now, I'm not saying Nick Lima potentially going to go to Austin and eventually he's going to win an MLS Cup with Austin FC, but I have a feeling could be a move where Nick Lima could maybe even be better when he was with Austin FC, and he's going to once again join the list alongside with Justin Morrow and Stephen Beitashour as these Quakes players that decided to go to another club, and they find better success with the other club and basically haunt the Quakes in terms of their decision to let them go. Now, another Quakes player that is also going to be going to Austin FC is Danny Hussein, although for Danny Hussein, he did not actually got sold by the Quakes. He actually got picked up in the expansion draft and actually got picked up in the number 1 overall pick of the expansion draft. Then you got Goram Kashir that is going to be heading back to his native country, Georgia, and he's going to be playing in a club called FC Lokomotiv, which currently play in the first division of Georgia. Then you got Vako going to the K-League to play with Ulsan Hyundai, before you got Luis Felipe also departing and going to Sacramento Republic in the USL Championship. Now, in terms of strength of this team, obviously it's got to be the holding midfield. I mean, I think when you look at this holding midfield, especially this holding midfield partnership with Jackson Yo and Judson, that is one of the best and probably the most underrated holding midfield in the entire league, because we know what Judson did last season, where, even though I didn't actually give him as the MVP of this team in my moving forward series, I did give a good shout out the fact that he was just such an engine for this team, and that he was the one that really covered the most space. And in some way, he kind of reminds me a little bit of a Diego Chara and N'Golo Kante, where he is kind of a holding midfield that has a lot of he covers a lot of area, and that he never runs out of energy, and that multiple times last season, how many times we've seen when the Quakes get caught on the counterattack, who is the guy that always stopped that counterattack and put out the fire? Yep, that's right, it's Judson. He's always there to be the last man back and able to make some crucial tackle to prevent the Quakes to really get caught on the counterattack. And that, again, I think this is one of those signings where, I remember a couple of years where people were kind of complaining the Quakes were getting an unknown kind of player from the second division of Brazil, and that it turns out it feels like this turns out not only to be a good signing, but maybe the Quakes actually for once find a diamond in the rough by getting a young South American that might not be playing in a well-known league and in the first division of Brazil, but turns out to fit perfectly in MLS. And then of course Jackson Yo, I don't really need to explain why he is good. I mean, he must be good if he is the captain of the US U21 team. And yes, I know a lot of people are going to remember that team as another team that failed to make the Olympics, but I really think Jackson Yo was by far one of the best player on that team, and especially in that game against Honduras, where eventually they lost that game to fail to reach the Olympic qualifier. He was really the man of the match and probably the best player on that team. And hopefully those kind of performance that he has with the U23 team, and alongside with the way that Jackson Yo has really like every single season that he's been with this team, he just continued to improve, and that I hope that is going to be the same case, because we can definitely have a guy that could be one of a holding midfield that could be one of the best in the league, and a guy that I won't be surprised in a couple of years that could maybe even get national team consideration, and also potentially sailed off to Europe. Now, in terms of the weakness of this team, yeah, it's the defense, and I don't really need to explain a lot about why the biggest weakness of this team is the defense. I mean, the stats pretty much shows where this team has repeatedly been one of the worst defensive team in the league. Like last season, even in a shortened season, they still somehow find a way to give up 50 plus goal. And if that season was actually a full regular season, this team could have been potentially breaking records, and maybe break the record that Cincinnati hold back in 2019 in their expansion year, where they gave up 75 goals that season. So yeah, the defense is definitely going to be a big weakness coming in, and the fact that the Quakes didn't really address that defense does make me a little bit concerning, and especially when I will talk about in my projected starting 11, where most likely that center back partnership is going to be Alanis and Youngworth, and both of those guys has a combined age of 60 plus, and when you have your defender that has a combined age of 60 plus, yeah, that's not really an ideal situation, and that again, I'm really concerned about this defense and how whether or not if they can potentially have a bounce back year, despite the fact that it kind of looks like the same center back partnership, except the only difference is maybe the fullback position is a little bit different, and of course we'll get to that in a minute. And then the other weakness on this team, I forgot to point out one more strength about this team before I get to the second weakness. Another strength for the Quakes this season is that I think these young kids are starting to show promise, and some of these guys like Keiko, who I think he's definitely showed some promise last season, and that I feel like he definitely needs to get more minutes this season out under Almeida, because last year he definitely did not get as much minutes. And for Almeida, a guy that always believed in youth, it's kind of surprised that he didn't give Keiko more minutes this season, or more minutes last season, although I'm assuming this season he's going to definitely get more minutes. And that one thing, Keiko can definitely be a great player on this team and be a great MLS attacking player, is that if he can figure out his finishing and also his first touch, which I heard he's been working that very hard this off season, and we'll see whether or not if all that hard work that he had in terms of figuring out his first touch and finishing will pay off heading into this upcoming season. And then other guys like Marcos Lopez, who, last season I think he kind of had his breakout year, and that, I think this is a good example of what happened when a player that, when he first came to the Quakes, I know that there was a lot of critics and a lot of people say that he was clearly not good enough with this team, but I just feel like maybe this is just a situation where, when Marcos Lopez came into this team, he's only 19 years old and he's playing in a new country for the very first time. And when you have young guys like that playing in a new country for the very first time, it is going to be very difficult to try and to adapt. And that I thought it I think we should at least give Lopez maybe 1 or 2 years to see how he's going to do. And I'm glad the front office actually for once actually didn't really take the bite, and that I know they didn't really have to listen to a lot of people that said that Lopez was clearly not enough and we should clearly get rid of him. And that last season, it's finally shown that he is starting to kind of mature a little bit, and if he can continue to do so, then I think he can definitely be a decent, not only a decent player, but a very decent option in the fullback position. And, talking about decent option in the fullback position, how many times have I said this about the Quakes? I mean, I think this is really the first time in a very long time I've said that the Quakes actually had a decent option in the left back, or at least in the fullback position, because for the past couple of years that has just not been the case whatsoever. And that it's great to see that the Quakes finally figured it out after that. This has been really the biggest mystery of this team for the past couple of years. Now, going back to weakness, the other weakness I have with this team is that there's definitely numerous questions I have about the attack. The first big question is Chofes Lopez, the number 10 that could really carry this team. Now, Chofes Lopez did not arrive here on a DP contract, and it's worth noting that the Quakes still have two DP spots left, and I'm assuming this summer they might be looking into the market to maybe get a DP kind of attacker. I mean, Jesse Fornelli basically said that in the past that they of course would do so. So I'm assuming we're probably going to maybe in a market to trying to get a DP kind of player. But for Chofis Lopez, I think the way that he can prove that he is the guy that the Quakes have been missing to in terms of a good number 10 that really orchestrates the attack. He needs to of course have a good season, because if he does not have a good season, it's not really the worst thing, because as I mentioned how he's not a DP player, and that I think he's also currently on loan with Chivas. If he doesn't work out for the Quakes, they can basically decide to loan him back to Chivas and actually look for that DP number 10 and use one of the DP spot on a number 10 that the front office seems to be promised that they of course would get. But again, I also kind of feel like I really hope this would eventually work out, because there's also times where the front office are kind of a little bit passive, and that they all sometimes they become a little bit patient in terms of some of the new arrival that comes, and at times it has worked out, but then there's also times where when they waited so long to basically keep this guy, and that it turns out he wasn't actually good whatsoever. So the verdict will be on Chofis Lopez to see if he is gonna be a guy that could be the creative player for this team. And then looking up front, Carlos Fierro, I think last season he definitely started to show some of his potential, but can he continue that heading into this new season? And then of course at that number 9 spot, I'm really hoping Wando will maybe get most of the minutes, but knowing this is Almeida, and that Almeida seems to have a love relationship with putting Andy Rios up front all the time, and how I always find it frustrated to see Rios up top, because he doesn't really provide a lot of things to this team. It's going to be interesting thing to see. Maybe he'll change that habit, or the fact that maybe we'll see Wando more in this season and really play as many minutes as possible to try to give one last hurrah and give his best effort to pretty much carry this team for the last time. And then of course the other big question of this team is also the goals, and that I know Wando is going to be the guy that probably will score the goals, but can guys like Fierro and especially Rios, can he actually score the goal if he is going to be starting most of the game? And can Espinoza, where I know Espinoza is a guy that is kind of like our main creative player, with him being the top assist leader for the past couple of years, but can he actually start figure out to score some goals, and can he start to figure out his finishing, which has really been the thing that kind of keep him to potentially become one of the best winger in this league. Like, imagine if he can actually banging the goals alongside with being a creative player. He is definitely going to be a guy that is considered one of the best winger in the league. But that being said, now let's get into the project starting 11, and I know the league have already put a project starting 11 for every single team, and an article that they put out I think a couple of weeks ago. But this project starting 11 is basically my project starting 11, and it's not the one from the league website, although some of the names here is pretty similar, and I think there's only one player that I put here in the project starting 11 that was not featured in the project starting 11 that the league basically put in that article. And also the formation is different. The league basically said that we're going to go with a 4-4-1-1. I decided to go more like a 4-2-2-1-3 or a 4-2-3-1 here. So in goal you got Mark Sinkowski, followed by Lopez, Alanis, Youngworth, and Beckes as the back line of this team. Then the holding midfield, you got Jackson Yo and Judson there, alongside with Chofis Lopez being the number 10. And then in the Y area, you got Fierro in the left wing, alongside with Espinoza on the right. And then up front, I put Wando or Rios because, I think both of them will pretty much rotate in terms of getting minutes. I have a feeling most likely Rios might get majority of those rotation minutes, but don't be surprised, Wando is going to also get some minutes, especially in some of these big games where you need to have a guy that can be able to score crucial goal in crucial situation. Well, Wando is one of those guys that can of course do it, and he showed time and time again, even last season, how many times he has been able to come up big to score a crucial goal for this Quakes team again. Some big time opponent. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the season preview of the San Jose Earthquakes. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And also, you notice how I didn't actually do a prediction of where they're going to finish, because for the prediction, I'm going to save it until I actually get to talk about the standings and me predicting what the table is going to look like for this season. Because if I actually show you guys where they're actually going to finish, well, you guys probably know where I'm going to put them when I do make that video where I predicted the Western Conference and Eastern Conference, and that it just kind of feels like a little bit redundant. So yeah, I'm just gonna wait till making my prediction of where they're gonna finish at that video where I start predicting both the Eastern Conference and Western Conference standings for this upcoming season. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.